Well, hello and welcome to the channel. Glad you could join me for this new project. So this is part one. This is the sIG33 15cm Heavy Infantry Gun by AFV Club in 1/35 scale. This is a German artillery piece. And this is going to be kit construction, one of two. So it's going to be a two-part build, and that's because there's over 230 parts in this kit. So it's going to take us a little while to put it together. Here, looking at our instructions, as you can see, starting with step one, we have an early version and a late version. And I'm going to be building the late version of this particular gun. So we have two different breech block assemblies that go on. And then we'll continue on with our instructions part two, where we assemble the barrel onto the carriage and the breech block, and then three, where we put it together with the gun slide, I guess, or sled, the sled for the gun. Now we're going to start out by cutting some parts off the sprues, which is what you have to do in order to build a kit. And I do cut these sprue gates a little long, as you can see here. That way it's easier for me later on to trim these sprue gates really close to the part. And I tend to say this for every video, but I do that for the benefit, just in case there are individuals that are new to modeling and are looking for better techniques to use in building their kits. And now it's easier for us, since it's away from the sprues, to clean those sprue gates right off. We can get our nippers really close in there and cut them off nice and clean. That's less for us to trim up and have to sand later on. So there is a little bit of flash here on our breech block. I'm just going to trim that off with an X-Acto blade, and then on the round portion here where there is a mold seam line, we're just going to scrape that down nice and smooth. So we do have a rather large mold seam line here, so I'm just going to use a 400 grit sanding stick, and we're just going to sand that off. Now we do want to pay particular attention to any detail that are on these parts when we are cleaning up these seam lines. We don't want to sand anything off that we may have to replace later on. I am paying particular attention here to where the gun barrel is going to mate up to the breech block assembly. We need that nice and square, and we're just going to test fit that and make sure that it's going to seat nice and flush with the breech block, and that metal barrel is going to really look nice on there. With our parts all cleaned up, we can start putting together the actual breech assembly here. And this contains three parts. So we do have to put the side on it and then the end onto it as well. It's always a good idea to test fit your parts, make sure that they're going to seat properly before you commit to the cement. And that's going to look good. So a little bit of Tamiya extra thin, just to get the part to tack up and stick in place. And then we'll just go ahead and run a little bit of Tamiya extra thin right around the seam there to make sure that the part's glued properly into place. Next, we need to attach the rear portion of our breech block. And so it has two little indicating nubs on it there, and a large surface at the top, so that you can't get this upside down. It'll only go one way. And we'll go ahead and glue that into place. Now, according to the instructions, it's time to insert our breech mechanism here. And it does have some stop tabs because this is a sliding breech, and it's a little hard to get it in there. But since we have just glued up the rear plate there, we can kind of wiggle it and get it to go, and it'll go in. It is a working breech. I don't know how long it's going to stay working. I imagine when we get some paint on it, it's not going to slide back and forth. So we're going to have to decide whether we want an open breech or a closed breech. And I think what we're going to do is just leave it open. So we have attached the cocking handle there on top, and it is in the open position, which is something to pay attention to in the instructions. But there is an open position and a closed position. So here we've got that top handle in the open position. And that's what the assembly looks like when it's complete. So now we need to look at the supporting structure that goes underneath the gun tube. And that's that flat piece right there. There is a tab on our breech block where it sets in. And we'll just add a little bit of, to me, extra thin to get that to tack up for us. So the ideal here is that we're going to go ahead and attach the barrel before that is completely set. As you can see, it's not much to hold it into place. So the barrel is actually going to support that, and we need to do the barrel next. So since this is a metal barrel, we're going to have to use some CA glue to attach it. So I'm just going to put a little bit of CA glue here on our breech block, on the contact point, and then on that supporting bracket in the front. And then we'll just go ahead and set the barrel in place. So I want to keep the barrel square to the breech block. So I'm going to press it into place there. And then we're just going to hold it there for a second. Well, okay, a couple of more seconds. So I'm going to clamp it down with using my fingers here. And we're just going to push that lower structure into place. Making sure everything's lined up. And it looks pretty good. All right. Now, the recoil sled has some photo etch parts. So we're just going to cut those out. I'm cutting these out with a rounded blade, and I'm also cutting against a small piece of glass here that I've laid down on my workbench, and that allows me to cut as cleanly as possible without bending these really fragile and thin photo etch parts. So there are 2 of one size, and then we have 3 of a different size. So I'm just going to 3. Yeah, I think it's 3. There is going to be a little bit of a nub where we cut it away from the photo etch fret, and I'm just going to use my 400 grit sanding stick here to polish those off. And you can see how small these are, so we need to be careful that we don't lose these. Now, since we are attaching metal to plastic, we have to use our CA glue again. But AFV Club has put these nice little slots where this photo etch goes. So we'll put a little bit of CA glue there into the slot, and then just press these parts into place. And that's the first one. And it doesn't look too bad. We're in good shape. So I've went ahead and attached all the others. They go in all the same way. And as you can see there, it's some really nice fine detail. Really nice detail there. I really like the looks of that. So with all of our photo etch attached, we need to go ahead and look at this next piece here. Now this is the elevation quadrant. It has a front and a back, and so we need to pay a close attention to its orientation. As you can see there, we have the arrows that tell us where the front is, so we know exactly how that goes, and we want to go ahead and get that glued up into its proper place. And so here I have attached the top plate to the recoil sled, and we do have our quadrant also attached to the bottom, and the recoil cross piece there, we've got that in place as well. So it builds up really nice. The parts are easily cleaned up. It's not a big deal. So next up, on our next page, we're going to start off here with Step 4, we have the front portion of our recoil sled that we're going to have to put on. I'm going to use this one here. There's two different options there. I just like the detail. And then we can attach the gun. And then in step 5, we start building up the chassis. Each side has multiple pieces. We'll just go through these as we assemble them. I'm really starting to get impressed by AFV Club's engineering in this kit. These parts really do fit really well. I don't know what else to say about them other than it kind of reminds me of mini art kits, because mini art kits are well engineered, and this kit is very similar to that. So here we're attaching those rotation points for gun elevation. We want to make sure that this is glued on nice and solid. So we'll add a little bit of extra thin there. We'll let those set up before we try to assemble it to the carriage, which will be much later on. We just want to make sure that those parts are square to the not to the carriage, but to the sled. So next up, we get to attach the gun to the sled, and it just sits right down on top of the sled. We want to make sure it's in its full forward position there. And at first I thought it might be a fit issue, but it just actually snaps right into place. So I'm just going to run a little bit of Tamiya Extra Thin along that edge and glue that right up. Starting to take shape. So now we're going to start working on the chassis for the gun. And we have this lattice structure here, but it does have a slight bend in it that's actually not supposed to be there. But I don't think it's going to be a real issue. We're just going to line it up with the side panel, and then I'm just going to tack it into place here with a little bit of glue. Again, Tamiya Extra Thin, of course. it's my favorite glue. And then I'm going to use these clamps here to clamp that lattice structure into place. And we're actually just going to move all the way down, a little bit at a time, clamping it into place as we go. And that'll help make sure that everything comes out, hopefully, nice and straight. That's our objective anyway. And it does, it works out nicely. So there's a handle that goes on here, and we're just going to glue that into place. And then we're going to start to attach all of these small parts here. There's a small gearbox here. We'll put that into place. And then attached to that gearbox is I guess we'll call it a small drive shaft. It passes through the side of the chassis, and we'll go to a gearbox that goes later on. And there are trail brackets here where a handle will go for the crew to help them actually leverage and move this gun around to get a better firing position. You just want to make sure that these parts are in their correct orientation, because you can glue them on backwards. Just pay close attention to the instructions. And then we have an upper bracket for that as well, and we'll just glue that into place. And slowly it's beginning to take shape. Lots and lots of detail on this kit. So we have our little gearbox here, and this is for gun elevation, and we just need to press it into place and make sure that our little shaft that goes to it is attached into the right spot. Okay, so time for more instructions. Step 7, we're going to take and put all these little attachments here on the left side of the gun carriage. And we got a little piece of PE to put in, and also traverse gearbox. So this is the elevation shaft. It's not glued in, and then we have our suspension shaft that's not glued in either. And then we'll put in the other structural elements. Now those parts are glued, and that'll help give it more rigidity. And then we'll start putting in our cross members. So that ought to be a lot of fun. Now there is another piece of PE that does go in, and we'll do that as well. Now the building up of the left side of our gun carriage is pretty much the same as it was on the right side. We just need to go ahead and start attaching these small brackets. A little bit of glue here and get it to tack into place, and then we'll go ahead and add some more once it's positioned correctly. Hoping that it's positioned correctly. But all these parts do go on just like they're supposed to. Just make sure that they're nice and straight and square to the side of the carriage. Otherwise, you know, if it's off, then that's going to be a problem. And you can get them off a little bit if you're not paying attention. So just make sure that they're seated correctly. And the instructions are really good about showing you the true location of these parts. And as long as you've done your cleanup and make sure that you are pressing these parts into place correctly and your alignment's good, then there's not going to be an issue with it. All these parts fit very well. And like I said before, it really reminds me of a mini art kit. Plenty of detail and lots of small parts. So here we're just going to install the gearbox, or part of the gearbox anyway, that allows minimal traverse of the gun. Now this round shaft that we're putting into place, it does not get glued in. The gun carriage actually slides on it, and it will slide on another tube as well. But this is the first one we're going to put in, and it's going to help us align these parts. You can see it's kind of tight. We'll take care of that later after we get the gun carriage nice and solid and rigid with all of our cross members in place. Here I'm putting in the elevation shaft for our gun tube. So it has two holes that it has to align with, one from the gearbox and one just in a receiver on the other side. So now we're going to attach this structural element on the bottom of our gun carriage, and it does get glued into place as all the others after it does. We just want to make sure that we've got the right distance between the left and right side, and it fits very well. I'm really amazed at how well this kit is going together. A little bit of patience and just drop glue in, and it'll all go together. So we're going to continue on with building up the bottom structure here. And like I say, these parts really do just drop into place. Now if you do have a little bit of a gap, just take and squeeze it together. A little bit of extra thin, and it's going together. So there is a little gap right here. I'm just going to squeeze that together with my tweezers. Give it a few seconds, and we can go on to the next part. Did I mention this kit has a lot of parts? Now we're going to attach the bottom portion of that gearbox for that minimal gun traverse. I was having a hard time thinking of it. Yeah, so that's the traverse gearbox. And we're also going to put a little bit of glue here to attach that shaft to it. So now, one of those little PE pieces that we saw before, it's just bent into an L shape. A little bit of CA glue to attach it into its slot. And that looks pretty good. So now we're going to start on the structural elements on the upper portion of the chassis. And this one we got to spread these grab handles apart just a little bit to get it in. It's not a great big deal. A little bit of, to me, extra thin there. Secure that into place. And then we can start sliding in our cross member pieces. Just want to make sure that it's pressed all the way down and seated properly. And we'll just glue that in. And we'll keep moving up through the chassis here. So these slots are really narrow, but the parts fit really good. Just press it in, glue it, and we're ready to move on. So moving on in our instructions for step 10, we're going to do this front plate here. That's got a little bitty piece of Photo Etch and then the front member there. And then we have a cover for the, I guess it's like a toolbox. You can position this either open or closed. I think we'll do closed, but it's got a couple of PE parts we need to put on that. And they do give us a picture of what it's supposed to look like, which is a good thing because there's no alignment marks for those PE pieces, so we're just going to have to rely on that graphic. And then we'll start working on the recoil spade or chalk, whichever way you want to call it. So we'll start off with the PE. A little bit of CA glue there because remember now we're putting metal parts onto plastic. And CA glue is the only way to get it to stick. So there are little corner indicators molded into this piece that shows us exactly where this PE part goes. And now we just have to slide it into place. Very carefully, of course. I'm having trouble here. But it does fit. It'll just slide right up into place. And we just want to make sure that it is seated correctly. And we can just glue that down. And now we can attach our front structure. And glue that into place as well. So this is our toolbox cover, and it's got those two PE pieces that we saw in the photograph that's in our instructions. Now you do have to do just a little bit of bending on the small ribs on the side of this thing, but it bends very easily and it's not an issue. Just glue those into place with some CA glue. And we're just going to use the picture that's in our instructions to show us what the location is, because there are no location tabs for it. And we'll just carefully set those into place. Now we can go ahead and glue our recoil chalk or spade into place here. And it fits nicely. Just want to make sure that it's glued well into place there. Now there is an eyelet, a bracket. It's a bracket. A bracket that goes here that holds a T-handle that helps the crew reposition the gun. And then it has a locking lever. And that locking lever, if I can pick it up with my tweezers, just is located into a small hole on the side of it. So once we get this into place, we just want to make sure that it's not crooked. Just kind of align it so that it looks mechanically correct. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. Mechanically correct. So I just want to press it down to make sure that the glue has made good contact there. Now it looks pretty good. Okay. Wow, that's a lot of parts for that. But it's coming along nicely. So far we've got the main portion of the carriage built, and we have the gun and its recoil sled assembled as well. And I am really amazed at how rigid the gun carriage and how square the gun carriage has come out, considering that we have so many parts that's gone into the build so far. And there is still quite a few parts left to go. We still yet have to build up the wheel ends and the shield for the front of the gun. There's just a whole lot more to do. But that will have to be in Kit Construction 2 of 2, which will be up next Friday. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all my subscribers. I really appreciate you guys. It's because of you that I keep making these little videos for you guys to watch and enjoy and experience a kit that you might be interested in. And if you're new to the channel and you're not a subscriber, I would appreciate it if you'd go ahead and subscribe. Obviously you like this kind of content, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you will be advised whenever I put up and post a new video, especially on this build. You're not going to want to miss part 2 of the build. And as always, I welcome your comments, and I read every one and I answer everybody back. And let me know if you've built this kit and what you thought about it. So until next time, I will see you guys in the next video.